Woo-hoo! All right. Woo-hoo! I got an automated message very quickly that said this meeting is being recorded.
Very good.
All right, super. Greetings, everyone. Well, Garrett Roche here, who was so kindly invited to become part of this platform today with Ms. Kimberly Erwin, author of the book, There's Only One Race, the Human One, Says Me, and owner of the publishing company Intercultural Connect Books here in Hudson, New York. And she has been a recent guest of mine a couple of months ago on my Monday morning show I am host of on WGXC 90.7 FM and WGXC.org as well, available on the web here in Hudson, New York. And I am interviewing today per Kimberly's invite to have me be a panelist, so to speak, in this sense, and her as the moderator of Johannes Froebel-Parker, author of the book Anastasia, Again, The Hidden Secret of the Romanovs. And he is a resident of Ravenna, New York, and he's been a guest on my radio show, as well as Kieran Riley's radio show, who's the Monday afternoon show host on WGXC, and also Ms. Patrice Maynard of the Waldorf Steiner School, formerly of the one in Ghent, but she's still a resident of Ghent and now works with Waldorf Steiner in a different capacity. Apologies that no one can see me on this recorded interview as well, but just using the best of technology to all the best of our abilities. We have battled the gremlins today, so at least we can all hear each other. And Patrice has been a guest of mine several times as well on WGXC. She now works with Waldorf Steiner School in capacity online and also traveling to Mexico and California. And today we're going to speak about why we were in need of positivity prior to the coronavirus crisis, and definitely why we are during it, as well as the fact of Johannes Froebel-Parker's book, Anastasia, Again, The Hidden Secret of the Romanovs, is about questioning popular belief and looking into if stories are accurate in history. So we will compare that to this story in history with the COVID-19 crisis. And also there's an interesting correlation as I introduced both Mr. Parker and Ms. Maynard to each other, because he's a descendant of Friedrich Froebel, who's the founder of kindergarten ideals. And that's very similar to the school that Patrice works for in a teaching capacity regarding the Steiner method of teaching. Yes, so John and Patrice, do you have any thoughts on your mind to start with?
Well, Garrett, I do, because I hear from a lot of people that they're depressed, that they're bored, that they're frightened. And I have to tell you personally, I have felt none of that throughout this whole virus epidemic time. I'm so busy doing things, helping people who need help and communicating with them in many different ways. It's actually been a very exciting time. I'm aware of the suffering. I'm aware of the hardships that people are going through. But because I've been so busy, especially helping people, bringing them groceries, going to the pharmacy for them, I'm enjoying having every opportunity to be of service.
You are absolutely amazing in that regard, John. And you and I both, just because New York has been on pause, as Governor Cuomo has quoted it, doesn't mean Garrett Roche has been either. My radio show has been, but they informed me, the WGXC staff, they will have me back, my voice back on the air as soon as possible. And I'm not sure if you've listened yet or not, but I sent you and Patrice and Kimberly as well the link to the Thursday afternoon show, because Tom DiPietro is back on the air. And Mr. DiPietro is also the president of the Hudson City Council, and he was extremely supportive, saying on the program he could not wait to have my voice back on the air, so I was extremely honored by that. And John, like yourself, I have been more, if you want to say, concerned about the reactions by many to the COVID crisis than, like you say, so many others sadly have been depressed and stressed regarding it. And what is interesting to note is that so many people were depressed and stressed prior to the coronavirus, which actually needs to be examined and, in looking at what led up to this point in society. Similar as you have with the alleged, true story of Anastasia.
That's true, because, for example, I think people who were depressed are more depressed than people who were ebullient and happy and cheerful. Patrice, I think you're one of them, definitely one of them. I know Garrett is definitely one of them. I talk to him almost every day, at least by email. Have maybe even kept that pace, or they've even become more positive, because there's not enough time in the day to do everything that we can do to help one another. When I get to bed now, since we've been on pause, I fall asleep immediately. I'm so exhausted from the things I've been doing all day, but I go to bed grateful that the whole day has been super productive. And so that's,
I think
that is refreshing and encouraging to hear. And go straight ahead, Patrice, please.
Well, just that I think there are many things that are coming to light during this isolation time. And one of them is how we ascribe meaning to our lives and how we relate to each other. And I think when there's a kind of inner resilience and inner habit of thinking of others, it's easier to get through a time like this. If you're dependent on the reactions from the outside world and from others, it puts you in a very, very difficult position. I feel very worried about, from my perspective as an educator, my job continues. I work from home and my colleagues work from home, but the work is still, I feel like my email volume has increased exponentially since this started, because people are driven more into that kind of communication than the usual talking to each other.
You and I both, Patrice. Thank you, ma'am. And what I'd like to play up on that and add to that, Patrice, because like I say, it's great that we're able to utilize those tools of technology as a positive influence.
Yeah.
But just as long as they don't become a 100% replacement for the direct human contact. And actually, if you look around you, the good people are going to become even better and form an even stronger bond than history's pages can tell. And if you listen to many people out there, they're actually saying, we can't wait until this is over. They're actually saying, in a sense, we want the direct human bond and contact.
Yeah. That's one of the great things.
As beings of the earth to return.
It's one of the great things about this. We'll be able to reset our values. But I worry in the meantime about, parents who have full-time jobs that don't stop because they're working from home and they have children they have to educate now. I think it's a real stressor. And I'm hoping that one of the positive things that comes out of this, Garrett and John and Kimberly, is that we begin to appreciate what teachers do. How it's taken for granted in our culture a lot about what teachers are able to do. And I think through this coronavirus isolation, where you have to educate your own children, we'll find out that it's not an easy thing to educate a child. It takes real artistry,
Well, there was a
Yes.
presentation earlier yesterday that I was the speaker with two others, who was a teacher and a mom. And they spoke about exactly that.
Oh, good. But
Terrific.
I think some mothers in particular, probably fathers too, But some I've spoken to are just feeling quite frantic because they don't have enough time in a day to do both the support their children need and to get the work done that they're expected to get done for their full-time jobs. It's too much. It's too much to ask of people. And I don't know what else we can do, but it's a real stressor for some. So I think just back to the question of why do people feel depressed or isolated, I think that's why, because they are, and because it is stressful, or it can be stressful to have to do both.
Yes, and exactly, Patrice. And at the same time, people will, some people anyway, will become more bonded with their families, whereas prior to that, there were, they were so immersed in life's distractions, and they were sort of detached from their own children and families. And there is one thing is we want to have broad memories and broad minds prior to this as well, like I say, before the virus, because there was definitely a need for positivity to be reinstilled into society prior to this. And now there is, even that much more of a need for it.
True. That's
and
very true, Garrett.
As my several-time phone guest and also audio recording guest, the wonderful recordings Armando Camina sends to my program of the Hope, Faith, and Dreams Foundation and Gratitude Project, as he calls it, from San Antonio, Texas. He has created the Go Far values, which are Go Far stands for generosity, optimism, focus, appreciation, and respect. And we ask ourselves, during this COVID crisis, were the majority of people treating each other with the Go Far principles? And there were definitely some who reached out, even more than, prior to COVID. But at the same time, there were many, when we looked around us in public facilities, stores and such, who were not. And there were many who were not prior to this situation either. And I could definitely go on for hours with all different corners that this could cover, but just in leaving it brief and simple for this interview, it's just adding to what you so eloquently said, Patrice.
Yes. Well, there's a whole, I guess you'd call it a religion, who follow the Black Madonna. And the Black Madonna is strong in many mythologies. And unlike the sort of Bethlehem-like Madonna, the Black Madonna sees when we need to practice love more strongly. And she'll bring a heightened consciousness. There were many who called 9/11 a deed of the Black Madonna, because those who were in New York were amazed at how nobody thought of themselves for at least 3 or 4 days after the big catastrophe, because the concern went from heart to heart for each other. And this could be looked at the same way, heightened consciousness is a gift, however it comes. And this has certainly given many, many, positive and negative, a heightened kind of consciousness that you just hope will last after we're allowed to be back in regular society again.
Definitely.
We do hope so.
By all means, and many people use the term, now, of course, they're using the term the new normal. I heard that term back in the 90s. And what's amazing is my mother, who is the most beautiful person ever to be in my life, Maggie Roche, who I dedicate all of my radio broadcasts to, she made, and I could go through them in the future sometime, but she made so many predictions that I see coming before me now, even back in the 90s. And what's interesting is you hear the term the new normal, and I heard that even back to the 90s. But there are so many people who say, like off the top of my head, of their heads rather, oh, I just can't wait till this is over with and we return to normal. Well, absolutely, we can't wait till it's over with. But at the same time, we need to think about and not have our memories erased as to what life was prior to it. And yes, there was definitely good and bad, but as a whole in society, there's a reason, as I say, there was a positivity group before this. There's a reason there's a Kimberly Erwin who feels the need to come out with a book. There's only one race, the human one, says me. This is prior to COVID. So it's just, we cannot allow media and misinformation to distract us and erase our memory. And that's why I'll refer back to Mr. Froebel-Parker there, challenging a long time, going on about a century now, a famous story about a Russian Grand Duchess, Anastasia Romanova. And it's just, people need to have the right given by, I won't say by man, but I'll say by nature and the earth, to at least be able to question and make choices. I had an English teacher in 10th grade who had a banner up in her classroom that said, what is right is not always popular. What is popular is not always right.
I remember that.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Listen, I'm going to have to go. I have a faculty meeting for this course I just finished in Mexico.
That's right, Patrice. Congratulations again.
It was really fun. It was great. But it's so nice to see you all and so nice to meet you, Kimberly.
Me too. Wonderful.
My gratitude is big that you did all this for Hudson and for all of us.
Well, I hope this isn't our last engagement.
Good. I hope. So good luck to you all with the rest.
Bye, Patrice.
That's the way. Thank you so much again, Patrice, for being part of this
it's always
interview here.
Always a pleasure, Garrett. Thank you.
Oh, beyond a pleasure is all mine. All the best now.
Then there was two on the screen, or should I say one?
I'm very honored, Kimberly. Kimberly, I was going to ask you a question. Garrett mentioned your book. I've heard a lot about, but could you, for the listeners and also for me personally, because I have not read your book yet, could you give us a synopsis of what the book is about?
Before I answer that question, let me ask you if you are hearing yourself or me double.
No.
Okay, great. I kind of am, but it's okay if you don't. No one does. I think the question was, what was the reason for the book at this time?
Yeah, and a short synopsis of what the book is all about, because I haven't read it yet, but I do want to, and the listeners may want to know too.
The title basically is what it's all about. There's a child who says, there's only one race, the human one says me. A children's book, Ending Racism. So it's a book that is strewn with poetry, rhyming poetry, that utilizes verses and stanzas to get the student or whomever the reader may be, even the adult, teacher or parent, to understand what got us here with racism and how we can end it. So first, it's in 3 steps. The first step is knowing yourself and appreciating yourself, because without loving self, there's no opportunity to love that which is outside of yourself. We might call it that name, but it's not. So it's like Bizarro World, right? When someone does something bad to you, but because they're close to you, you're supposed to love them, you'll accept that behavior and then may in fact decide that that behavior is okay and then that it represents love. That's why some people stay in bad relationships, because they feel the love, but they equate negative behaviors to love. So if you don't know what love is or feel it from yourself, then you may not be able to give it appropriately. So that's the first case. So I ask the students and I share the vision, the students acting out scenes in the book. So we actually have real live students from Hudson involved in the scenes. So that's step 1, getting to know who you are and love who you are, regardless of what you look like, sound like, come from, everything. You're part of the planet, And just like a rose or any other kind of flower, you smell great. And the second step would be to understand a little bit about how we got here as a society. You know, if we have the information, then we don't need to accept falsities. So I give a brief poem in that case too. We talk about slavery and how through slavery going forward, we had people who thought difference was a negative and devalued certain people because of it. But recognizing that if you devalue one, you devalue all. So for all of us to stand tall, we have to stand together. And that also is represented by two young students involved in a scene to showcase that. And then the last part of the book is, well, now you love yourself and you know the history, so what's next? So you have to act on it. So it's, what do you do going forward with the knowledge that you have? Is it okay just to know, or can you present your knowledge and information to others? And it could be anything that you feel like you're comfortable doing at the time. You can just talk to someone who looks differently than you, or if you're hearing someone not saying something that's true about something that you know now the truth of, you might share that. Like I had a story where some young Black men were saying that they didn't know, or they didn't know if African American was better than Black. And my situation was, it's as you would like. You know, it's like your name. When we call someone Kimberly, you might call me Kim when I was younger. And as I grew up, I might prefer Kimberly, but I'm the same person. So it doesn't really matter what you call me, but it's appropriate to ask me what I would like to be called. So some people, I don't mind if they call me Kimberly, and some people, because of where we come from and how long they've known me, they may call me other nicer names like Kimmy or Kimber. I get it all. And that's just like with the terms that we give each other ethnically. You know, we don't use the term Oriental anymore for Asian. So I say all of this in very youthful terminology. We had a kindergarten teacher, 30 years, who edited the book for just that ability, so that students of a younger age group can understand the terms, and that parents and teachers who are older, who may not even recognize their errors, can find that out and then have a lovely discourse with their children before they get to a certain age where they won't listen anymore, where they're going to listen to their peers, and their peers don't know nothing. Right? Exactly. That's a long story. Thanks for asking.
That was a wonderful explanation. I really appreciate that.
Well said, Kimberly. And now, John, how about yourself sharing a little bit about your book, and as far as people being open to accepting different ideas contrary to popular belief or popular thought process, similar to you know, the idea of Kimberly's book, but in a different context, of course, about a particular event of a particular circumstance with a family, the Romanovs. And I'd like you, John, to please compare how you're choosing to and act upon your right to question that in history, and compare it to some things you or any of us may question about what's occurring currently in history.
A wonderful question, a great opportunity also, Garrett. And Kimberly, I want to thank you for a great introduction, because I would like to build on what you have just spoken about. Garrett asks about questioning what we have been told, and that's what you were saying also, that we have to question, what have we been taught about race? What have we been taught about who is what and who is valued as what? And we have to engage those questions to grow. If we don't question those sacrosanct images that we have been given, we can't grow. we just accept it and we'll keep perpetuating the same thoughts. And in this case, with Anastasia Romanov, for example, I never knew exactly what really happened. So when I was confronted with the possibility that the woman who was buried in the Russian Orthodox monastery might be Anastasia, I didn't say, oh, that can't be. I didn't reject that out of hand, because I said, well, I need to question. Only by questioning this event will I get to a place where I am comfortable with my own feelings, my own idea. And I have to say, they had something to do with race also, because Kimberly, I'm a genealogist, and I love doing genealogy. And I've always thought of myself as English and German. I thought that was my ethnicity. But come to find out, I'm everything. I think every single continent is represented in my genome, which means that somewhere along the line, I had an ancestor, a great-great-great-grandparent, grandmother, grandfather, who came from a different part of the world, a different ethnicity, and has enriched me. Maybe it's not visible in my my outward appearance, but in my inward being, I'm enriched from every single one of those ancestors of mine. And that was something I attained by questioning for myself, where did I come from? What background built me as a unique human being, similar to all, in that we're human, and unique in that it's a different recipe that got me here than got any of us here. We're all sort of our own special pastry, and all delightful. As you said, all flowers which smell great, and we're all pastries which taste great too. And
I like that. Yum.
yeah.
Uh,
And to revert just for a moment, you mentioned about the flowers, and I smiled. You couldn't probably tell because you were speaking, but my ancestor, Friedrich Froebel, he started kindergarten. And one of his analogies was that children were like the flowers in a garden. They were diverse in their singularity, and they were all beautiful in their singularity, but they were also beautiful when put together in this multifaceted garden, which was teeming with life. Roses and violets and vines and twigs and everything together. It was just a beautiful garden. And that's how he talked about his kindergarten. So when you mentioned that about the flowers all smelling great, I said, wow, my ancestor would really respond to that in a positive way. So thank you for using that analogy. And just to get back to the question specifically, Garrett, of Anastasia Romanov, if I had just believed what quote unquote historians, I'm not going to say historians and quote unquote, because I don't think everybody has done their homework enough to be considered a historian. They may be a writer of history. That doesn't mean that they are an historian. I wouldn't have questioned what I was seeing with my own eyes and finding in my research, that this woman who was sort of rejected as being Looney Tunes, to use that expression, or deranged, or some kind of a psychotic, that she was really telling the truth. She was rejected by her peers, but she was really telling the truth. Isn't that a sad comment? That somebody who was being sincere, being truthful, is being rejected because the other people listening cannot fathom what she is saying. And of course, we haven't proven beyond a doubt that Evgenia Smithisko is really Anastasia Romanov, but I think that will happen very quickly. Just the other day, I had tweeted something from my Twitter account, which is, if anybody wants to read my research, it's at Froebel, F-R-O-E-B-E-L, at Froebel, that Evgenia was Anastasia, and had written wonderful anecdotes about her mother in her memoirs, which I included in my book. And I was surprised that the Kremlin Museum in Russia liked that tweet.
Whoa.
And
That's right.
I was totally flabbergasted. And Garrett, you know also, because I think I told you this about a month ago, every morning, Kimberly, I wake up and I check my Twitter feed, as probably millions of us do, who's read my comments, who likes them, who's defriended me, who has befriended me, you know. I have to smile. It's sort of a morning ritual of mine. And I saw that the Russian embassy in Denmark had liked 26 unique tweets about
That's right.
Evgenia's being Anastasia Romanov. And so you see, Garrett, that persistence, and Kimberly, that bravery. I think it takes inner bravery to question, like, who are we? What is love? Who really loves me? Who's really using me? Who do I really love? That takes bravery to ask those questions. I think it paid off for me at that moment. I said, listen, I guess 20 years of research, and now the Kremlin museums and the Russian embassy are liking what I'm saying. I guess it was good to dare to question in the first place. I think I always knew that innerly, but it was nice to get the positive reinforcement outwardly also. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, Garrett.
Positively, John. And I'd also like you, please, if you would, to compare questioning that large, renowned piece of history around the world. Many privy to it, many have not been, who maybe perhaps will wonderfully learn about it now, and even who Anastasia Romanov was.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like you to compare questioning that, if you will, to many of the events and occurrences we see around us now during the COVID crisis, as we provide each other the most positive support possible.
Well, and Kimberly, please jump in any moment that you would like to too. Listen, I had always held the WHO, the World Health Organization, in high esteem just because it dealt with health. I thought, gee, anybody who's dealing with health must be worthy of my respect. And yet, at the beginning, what they were telling us, that there was no human-to-human contagion possible, turned out to be nothing more than Chinese propaganda, which was because it's a communist society, and of course they wanted to play all their cards close to their vest. And I feel, personally, lied to, that the WHO would have perpetuated such a falsehood. And that then slowed up the process of mitigation, slowed up the process of social distancing, and of all the good things that we're doing right now. Think of how much better it could have been had we had reliable information from a source which we held in high esteem, or we were told to hold in high esteem. And the only lesson I can learn from this personally, maybe, is to get our information from various sources. Don't swallow any one line as the gospel truth, and to think for ourselves, not to rely on a talking head to make our opinions for us, but to come to those opinions even if they're not popular, so that and also to leave open the possibility that maybe we're going to learn new things too, that we don't have all the answers, but we don't have to accept one organization's depiction as the gospel truth. It's taught me to be humble and to dig deeper and to question further. And so I don't know if that maybe answers your question to some extent.
I just want to jump in and just say, when we look at China, because you mentioned the World Health Organization, and I was like you, believing that that's an organization that's truly philanthropic. It's there solely for the good of humanity and to end disease and suffering for, in most part, those who are more impoverished in the world. And so taking the politics out, which is very difficult to do when you're thinking about China, but I think if the World Health Organization were to believe China, that would have been okay. because who else was going to know? It started there, they were dealing with it. They give you the information. Where else are you going to look for something different? That's one place you can get it. I think the problem arose when we saw on the ground in countries like Italy. I have people who have family members there. I love Italy. I like being there. I know people are there. So I'm always constantly, and other parts of the European continent. So I'm always looking to my friends in those areas to tell me what's happening on the ground. And the Italians were yelling and screaming what was going on. We can see pictures of South Koreans lining up to get the swabs. So we didn't have to rely just on China. And though the World Health Organization had to initially, eventually they got to the point where they were able to tell the reality of it. So I don't really want to put all of that on the World Health Organization. I think they're still relevant and necessary, but we need to learn the lesson that you mentioned, John, is when possible, get as much information for as many different places if you want the absolute truth. And even then you might not get the absolute truth, but you could be comfortable then with your response to it.
Good point.
No one's
And
going to be all knowing.
And I just wanted to add, I like your point about the WHO. In the future, the WHO may want to confer with various different sources and have a real debate. I mean, there's nothing wrong with physicians and epidemiologists and virologists to debate with each other, because, you know, sometimes one person sees a certain reality and another person sees another, and together they get to the higher ground rather than defending their own positions as sacrosanct. You know, talking to each other is a very good thing.
Exactly. And
I'm loving talking to you two right now.
And we are,
by all means. Thank you, John.
We're designed to see things from our own perspective. We must. Who else's perspective are we supposed to see things from? But if we want to continue to be a growing humanity and not stay somewhere in the past, then we're going to have to do exactly what you say. Have a robust debate, and then try to see many different versions of the truth, and then use whatever version that works for you in your situation. I used to live in Europe, in Germany. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch.
Oh, wunderbar, das habe ich nicht gewusst.
That's right.
Nope, you didn't know. Now you do. But
I do.
When I first landed in Germany, and that was my second country, I went to France first when I was in my 20s, but in my 30s, I go to Germany, and I just didn't understand the regular things that happen. And I thought, these people are crazy. And then I became German, so to speak. I lived in their world. I walked in their shoes, and I started looking around and going, yep, this makes sense. This makes sense. So it's where you come from. So until you walk in someone else's shoes, don't pretend to know their reality.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody's reality is at face value important and needs to be noticed, learned, and maybe even negotiated.
Good point. Which really requires a little bit of humility on each of our parts, you know.
Exactly. Well said, both of you. And the World Health Organization was formed in 1948, just after the end of World War II, which is interesting to note. There is a point I can make to say that there's a different standpoint that could be taken as far as healthcare, because people also need to be looked at as individuals in that regard, as opposed to painting everyone with a broad brush that people in positions of power know what's best for each individual's health. One person's form of healthcare might differ from another person.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep. May I tell you both a funny anecdote? Because I had German healthcare when I lived and worked in Germany. And I had this is my first foray into quote unquote socialized medicine. It's very funny because I had a tooth that I had damaged playing basketball when I was a kid in high school, and it was very brittle and it was discolored and the whole 9 yards. And so I knew that I had dental coverage. And so they told me, okay, well, first you have to be approved for this procedure. Coming from America, I thought that was very strange that I would have to go to a board to be looked at and decided upon whether my tooth was worth, you know, the cap or not. But I said, okay, this is their system. So as Kimberly said, I'll have to walk in their shoes to learn what it's all about. So he said to me, the head doctor, why do you want a cap on your tooth? I said, because I am afraid I'm going to bite into a wurst and it's going to break off. It's brittle. I really would like to have a cap to give it more structure. And he says, well, no, we can't give it to you on the front tooth because that would be cosmetic, because when you smile, everybody sees your front tooth. He said, we can give it to you on your side tooth. I said, yes, doctor, but does the side tooth need a cap? I didn't even know it needed a cap. And he goes, well, that's all we can give you. And I thought to myself, well, now I was so young that Kimberly, here's the point again. I accepted what he said. I said, okay. So he gave me a cap on a tooth, which to this day, I have no idea whether it needed a cap or not. And the tooth in the front of my mouth, I had to wait to come back to the United States to have it taken care of by an American doctor. And now when I think about it, I'm sort of glad I went through that to see how a system that doles out healthcare based on somebody else wondering if you need it or not, this maybe needs to be tweaked. He didn't know what was going on in my mouth, and he gave me the cap that I didn't want. I didn't pay for it. That was nice. But he wouldn't give me the cap. He wouldn't give me the cap that I wanted because that would be quote unquote cosmetic. And I said, yeah, but that's the one I'm afraid is going to break if I bite into something. So
well, I kind of see the same thing here too. Like I know people with large, or new, because they don't have them anymore, very large breast, sizes that I didn't even know existed, and I am a woman. And when she's a teacher, she had perfectly good insurance, and she was given the ability to get a reduction paid for. But the problem, though, was she had to claim that it was harmful for her to keep her breasts, because if she was just trying to get them smaller for cosmetic reasons, just to look better, just to, you know, say, look, I don't look so huge, you know, I'm a little bit lighter, and then, you know, she could lose weight with the amount of extra weight that she was carrying. So she had to make sure she wrote down that that wasn't the reason. Then she had to have her doctor sign off on it before they can pay for it. So I would say it's the same. I think across the board, no one wants to pay for something to make you look good. But if it's your health and it's going to hurt you, you know, your living and your quality of life, then fine. But yeah, I think the tooth part was a little ridiculous. But the fact that, yes, I mean, you have breasts out to here, then of course, if someone wants to remove them, it's different if you want to add to them. But if you want to, why would I have to? She was like, why do I have to sign this? Look at these things, you know. Exactly. She couldn't run, you know, she could, so. But then, you know, so I guess, yes, I mean, as much as any one system is strange, we can probably see the same system across the board, because humans everywhere are what? The same. We're humans. Flowers, we all smell.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's absolutely
well said, both of you. And is
Garrett,
the bottom
can
line?
Can I say something right now? Because I think it's a really great time. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to read one poem from my book.
Oh, please do, Kimberly. I'd love to hear it.
Please, go for it, dear.
Short, and I think it would fit right now because we're talking about, you know, the differences of cultures, and this helps. So this is, I don't have page numbers, but it's in the middle of the book. The green and red, Christmas colors. See the human race, big and small, must appreciate our differences, them all, from the various shades and tones of our skin to our hair, be it curly, straight, thick, or thin, and even the varieties we find our nose, eyes, and body shape in. Add to that the various places we are born and how differently we sound. It just makes for an interesting us to be around.
Wow.
Beautiful. And I've heard
Love it.
Thank you.
When we discussed your book personally, Kimberly, I remember you reading that one to me. So touching. That was the perfect choice for now. Thank you.
Wonderful.
You're welcome.
And Garrett, may I just chime in one more thing about the World Health Organization, please?
Certainly, John. Please do.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You know, again, as we talked about Anastasia Romanov, about our own origins, where we come from, we need to dig. And after I heard that the WHO had given out false information, and they probably were giving out information that the Chinese had given them, so one has to ask, why would the Chinese government give out false information? And I think we can all come up with many reasons why they would do that. I stumbled upon a quote by the first director of the WHO, and his name was Brock Chisholm. And this came from a tweet that I had read by Jordan Sather. And this is what Brock Chisholm of the World Health Organization said when he was the director. To achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, their loyalty to family traditions, their national patriotism, and religious dogmas. And I'm hoping, personally, that that was just his own personal outlook on things and not one that was written into the HWO's sort of ethos that they're carrying along today. And,
WHO, interesting, John.
And I think they should come out and say that maybe this man was a good director, but we do not necessarily endorse his ideas about one world government and the removal of individualism, because I think all three of us would definitely agree that individualism is what makes us able to share positively with others and make the world a better place by being individuals, but being socially minded and loving our neighbors as much as we can and helping whenever we can help. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
I could not have said it better myself, John. Thank you so much. I wonder if he was related to Shirley Chisholm, the famous African-American leader and rights activator, civil rights activist in the 60s, Shirley Chisholm. Also, John, you had sent me in our personal correspondence a blurb that was sent to the Ministry of Health. His surname was Ricciardi, I believe, that stated only 12% of death certificates in Italy actually showed that those people had passed away as a result directly of the coronavirus.
I did send that to you, yes. That the rest were really died on because of comorbidity of the other underlying issues, which were then complicated by COVID-19, which I guess could happen with the flu too. You know, a person, if you're healthy, can survive the flu, but a person who's got COPD or some other kind of underlying issue might succumb to flu or any other kind of viral malady that they might catch.
That's correct. It's similar to pneumonia. This is a similar situation to a person can pass away from pneumonia, especially if they have an already pre-existing condition or if they're elderly.
Right.
Like asthma or something that way. We were talking
Asthma
about that
too.
earlier with Michael Schmidt. I see the time, and I think I'm going to have to probably leave in about 5 minutes. So if there's any other questions you have for me, you might want to.
Kimberly, where can we get your book?
Well, it is available at the local bookstore here, Spotty Dog's Books and Cafe.
Oh.
Also, there will be an online version coming out in May. And For the people who have joined the summit, we will be doing a giveaway of the hardcover, so you can have a signed copy. And if people look at my many social media sites, so you will find a link to have it delivered to your own home, but you'd have to pay the $2.38 for shipping and handling. Or maybe it's $3.49.
Sounds like it's worth it. I'm sure it's worth it. And hopefully after the virus, if we have copies, you'll be willing to sign them for us.
Oh, absolutely.
Wonderful. I look forward to that very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Beautiful.
It's a great pleasure to talk with you.
And thank you so much again, Kimberly, for this opportunity. It means the world to me. And thank you again, John, and also again to Patrice, even though she skedoodled earlier. But as I say on the radio, we're going to make history.
Amen. I believe so.
Amen.
Kimberly, you take care. Wonderful meeting you.
One last question. When is your next radio event?
Oh, thank you for asking. That's open right now, but I'm sensing it's really not too far away. I don't believe it will be this coming Monday unless I hear from the WGXC staff. I'm waiting to hear back from the artistic director. His name is Tom Rowe. In this regard, hopefully, I'm going to safely say now a ballpark figure as to when New York will become unpaused, as Governor Cuomo has quoted it on May 15th, but hopefully it will be before that. I might possibly be doing a broadcast via Zoom. But I'm going to gather, they inform me they get my voice back on the air as soon as possible at WGXC. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks, give or take, I'll say.
Well, if you send me an email, I'll post it on all my social media sites.
Oh, you're way too kind and sweet, Kimberly. Cannot thank you enough, dear. And I'll keep everyone posted, of course, straight away. And I'd love to be able to forward this recorded link around to this interview today.
You'll definitely get it when the summit's over. All presenters will have a link, for sure.
Yes. You wouldn't believe John tweets them all over the place.
Oh, I'll make sure it goes around the
my
world.
radio shows.
Okay.
Okay, guys. Pleasure talking to you all, and stay safe and stay healthy.
You too. Thank you.
Spectacular. You're the same. And sane.
Sane.
And sane.
Oh. Okay,
All the
guys.
best.
God bless. Right.
God bless.
Bye, Kimberly.